Hey everybody, this is Thomas and Tanner Gallant from Maritime Hockey, and today we are joined by Jason O'Leary from New Brunswick. He is the newest coach of the SCL Tigers of the National League in Switzerland. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
So before we get into talking about a little bit about hockey, how's your summer been going?
Well, it's been a busy summer. It's been the first time that I've stayed over here for the last few years. Just getting into a new town, getting used to the new players, getting settled in a new place, an apartment and all that stuff. It's been exciting, but a bit hectic, I would say.
Yeah.
So before we get into talking about your coaching career and all that, maybe we can talk about your experience playing for St. Thomas University and bringing home the championship in the 2000-2001 season.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the most exciting times. I really loved my time at STU. It was awesome. It's a shame that the program's no longer running, but we had a great bunch of guys that year. I think the 4 years that I was there, we had amazing character guys. We had a lot of guys from the Maritimes. In truth, I think my year at STU, my first year, we had 9 guys that were from New Brunswick or the Maritime provinces, and I always felt that was a big advantage for us. And we, lots of things happened. We got lucky a little bit. We had great goaltending. We had, really good leadership, and it was an awesome time. It's a shame that we couldn't have done better at the Nationals. But it's something I'm pretty proud of because it's the only championship that they've had, and that was pretty cool to do.
Yeah, before we go into your new job, can you kind of describe how you first got into coaching in any league, really?
It started when I was probably 15 years old. I remember coaching at the UMB hockey school in St. Andrews, and helping out there. And I really enjoyed the development part of it. I think it would be probably the best way to put it. And then I had some really good coaches, and this guy's from, Larry and George Wood when I was really, really young, who had a massive impact on me as a kid and as a student and as a player. To guys like, guys that you wouldn't even know, John White, who used to work in Fredericton at the Gleaner and was also coaching me in Pee Wee. And I think probably the largest or the most lasting impacts, obviously the Wood family in Normochto being, growing up there and playing hockey there and going to school there. But would have been Kevin Pottle, Danny Grant, when I was with the Midget Canadians. And that was really the time where I thought this might be something that I would do more lastingly and more long-term, as opposed to just whether it be hockey schools and helping out and whatnot. And I think that's kind of what led me down the path to teaching, because that's when I was at STU and I got my teaching degree. I was fully intent on starting to coach right after junior hockey. I had, I would have gone to university, obviously, but I was thinking to myself, I'm not getting a ton of interest. You growing up in Fredericton, not playing major junior, you're kind of limited as to what you're going to do. And I remember having a conversation with Kevin Pottle at the LBR in Fredericton, watching a Black Cats hockey game. This was years ago. And he said to me to play as long as I could, and coaching will always be around. And as soon as I was done at STU, I went down to the East Coast League, had some games with Florida, with Jerry Fleming, and he was pretty blunt. He's like, this is something that's probably not cut out for you, or you're not cut out for it. And I went right back and started teaching. And once I started teaching, somebody asked me if I wanted to coach. And so I would have been 23 years old. I think I had my first coaching job where I was actually, running a team, managing a team, doing everything on my own. And from then on out, it hasn't stopped. I coached midget AA. I remember moving to Vancouver and I coached Pee Wee AAA, midget AAA, and was volunteering with the Vancouver Giants all at the same time. I've been kind of everywhere doing everything. And so that's how it just kind of started. And the teaching aspect of it really allowed me the opportunity to get into the sports schools environment. And when I moved to Europe, I started with the Okanagan group in Penticton, British Columbia at the time. And they happened to start an academy in Europe, and that's how I got over here. And I've been here almost 13 years now. Crazy.
Yeah, like when it's probably one of those things, you know, when you first went over there, did you expect to kind of stay over there, or did it just kind of
No
happen?
chance. No way. I remember my ex-wife and I talking and saying, it'll be 2 years. We'll go for 2 years. It'll be a great experience
Yeah.
for the kids. That was in 2009, and I've never left since. And that tells you something, you know, like my kids, if I've got two sons, both boys are fluent in German. They've been in Austin. They've lived just outside of Vienna. They've lived just outside of Zurich here. They have, you know, traveled all over Europe and seen more places than I'm sure most people that I know or ever grew up in. I mean, I never imagined that I would be over here for this time. And so it's been, you know, lots of cool things, see lots of cool things, but it's definitely different than being back home. That's for sure.
So, Jason, you know, you kind of have that maritime grit on you. You know, you kind of moved up your ranks in Switzerland. You kind of started in the NLB, and now you're coaching your first National League job. What's been your key to moving up the ranks in coaching?
That's I don't know. I've been lucky. I was really fortunate. My first professional coaching job, to be with good people, and that really helped me grow as a coach and as a person, I think. And I think probably just humility and work ethic. Like that's something that, you know, when you first start out, I think you underestimate how much time and energy goes into coaching. And you know, I grew up in Gornish, grew up on a farm, you know, I had really good, I'd say, fundamentals built into me from my parents. And so you kind of take that stuff with you. And I've never been the smartest guy. I've never been the most talented guy, but I was always able to work hard, and I was a pretty good team guy. And I think those things have helped me establish myself as a coach, because I kind of approach it the same way. I don't like it when people make the head coach out to be like the whatever, the you know, the be all end all. And like I wouldn't, you know, and I apologize if anybody who listens or watches this knows Mike Babcock, but I wouldn't profess myself to be more important than any player. I think it's important that the players get all of the rewards, and when stuff's not going right, then I usually have to shoulder the blame. And that's kind of the way I was as a player. So I think that is probably the way it kind of happened, and just being me. I think that's, you know, every coach will tell you got to be authentic, and you don't need to do anything or be who you aren't. And I think that's really the only way that it's kind of evolved, you know, the career that I've had. Because I mean, I've been doing it for geez Louise, you're looking at like 18 years now. And I mean, I never thought I'd be coaching, like doing what I do. Like, and I'm lucky, but I never thought I was going to be doing what I was doing.
So maybe you can tell us some of the obstacles you've had to overcome since you started coaching, if any.
Well, not being a big name for anywhere, for anything, that would probably be the first one. I think when when I was in the Maritime, like when I was a kid, we didn't have Major Junior. The Moncton Alpines were just coming into the league. Halifax had started, of course, but there was no real, Cape Breton wasn't really there yet. You didn't have the Fog Devils in St. John at that time. So there was a real lack of exposure to what I would say like higher level hockey. So when you know, there was not, the American Hockey League, of course, was in town, and in the Maritimes, very prevalent. University hockey was very good, but a lot of the guys that came in and played weren't from, you know, where we're from. And so that was a bit of a challenge, because when I started coaching, I pretty much, and I think we had talked about it before, but I left the Maritimes when I was 23 and got my first teaching job. So by the time you're hitting, you know, out west at 23, well, I didn't play out west. I didn't grow up out west. So I don't have coaches or guys in my back pocket that can help give me a nudge here or a push there. So I didn't have that kind of background. So that kind of made it harder, because you're always trying to not prove yourself is probably the wrong word, but I guess earn the trust of everybody to get opportunities. So that's really a challenge, and it's always a risk, you know. And then it became, well, you need more experience. You need to get this, you need to get that. And which I agree with. I think that to a degree that the experience is a very valuable thing. There's no question. But the question was always, how do you get that experience? I mean, I remember, and I wasn't even fully aware of this. I did a coaching production. Sorry, there's a tractor. For anybody asking, I'm also coaching in like rural Switzerland, so it's not Zurich. Don't worry. I did a coaching presentation with Mike Kelly in 2000 and, it might have been 2006, 2007, in Vancouver when he was coaching with the Canucks. And I had no idea. I mean, I knew who he was and had a lot of respect for him, obviously, but I could never pick up the phone and ask that guy for help. And he's a Maritimer. So I think that that's one of the things that's changed a little bit now for guys. Like, it's been a little more advantageous, because once you play in major junior, or once you're able to get some games at the pro level, or, you know, even at the profile that University of New Brunswick's established now as well. I mean, these guys are getting opportunities that or getting help along the way that maybe guys earlier didn't have that opportunity to get, unless they played at the NHL level or the American League level, or had come over to Europe and played. And I had absolutely no idea how to do any of those things when I was a player. I mean, I had no agent. My parents were, you know, a mailman and a nurse. They had no interest in hockey really, other than just to drive the kids around. So I think that's one thing. And then as I got to the pro level over here, language, it was huge. It was such a, you know, when you come to Europe and you start coaching, the cultures are so different. I mean, I'm pretty fortunate. I grew up in a multicultural family. But man, you get into Switzerland and Austria and Germany, and, you know, you're working with Slovenians, Germans, Swiss, Swedes, Latvians, Serbians, Bosnians. Like, there's a lot of different cultures that you're coming across, and everybody's so different. So that was also a big shock for me. And when you come from Rusagonis New Brunswick, and I can tell you, you're getting a player from, you know, who's from Serbia, who literally grew up in the middle of a civil war, and you're going, we don't really know what that's like back home, and we don't. So those things I found were really challenging, because you have this expectation that everybody's been schooled in sports or hockey or whatever the same way as you have, and that's not the case. You know, like, we're really fortunate that there's a lot of people, particularly in Canada and North America, that give a lot of time. But, you know, my dad watched hockey. I grew up watching hockey with my dad or my brothers or, you know, friends. Here, the culture's not immersed in it the same way. So some of their education, coaching education, or hockey education, sport education is just different than ours. And they learn it different ways. And the generations, of course, as I get older, that becomes even more difficult, because now you're not just reaching out to a different culture, but you're also reaching out to different generations from a different culture who, you know, may not experience what my kids experience or whatever. So those types of things have been the most challenging. And then, yeah, I mean, and then opportunities. It's always hard. Timing's always going to be right. And so many different things happen, man. It's a challenge sometimes to find the right fit at the right time. And you never really know. Like, it's always a risk. You know, that's the other thing about coaching, is it's not as secure. It's never secure. I mean, when I got fired last year, you know, guys reached out and they're like, yeah, now you're finally a coach because you've been fired. But you tell that to your 12-year-old or your 14-year-old son, and it's you're trying to explain to them. And I remember when I first got the coaching gig in Langenthal in the B League, you know, one of the guys came up to my kid at school and said, now your dad's the next one that's going to get fired. And it's just like, you don't expect those things. You know, you don't have to explain that to a 8-year-old or to a 7-year-old. So that's a little bit different, but it's part of the gig, right?
Yeah. So this season you'll be joining the Tigers. It's your first year there. The team finished towards the bottom of the standings. So you're being a new voice behind the bench. What will be the message to the team heading into the season, and what's your expectations for the team?
Well, it's a little bit different here in that you can have a lot of changeover from year to year, and we've added 4 new import players that we think will have an impact, and we, you know, I mean, no different than North America or anywhere else in the world, for that matter. I think we talked about the culture of the team, and this team's has great fan support. It's a I would say a blue collar community, and that it's a lot of farmland, it's rural. You know, we needed to kind of get back to where the club used to be consistently a better team. It didn't necessarily mean that they were winning, you know, championships and playoff rounds, but we had to kind of find what exactly the identity of the club was going to be and where we were going to go from there. And we've added some players who we believe speed-wise have increased our potential. We have, as I mentioned before, the import players who we feel offensively can give us a bit of a boost. They didn't have that last year. And we're going to roll with some younger guys. And by younger, I don't mean 16 years old, but certainly guys that have less experience in the league, but have some attributes that we think could make them a very dangerous team. And for us, the goal is to make the playoffs. You know, you have in our league, they call it the pre-playoffs, which means 1 to 6 qualify right away, and then your bottom 4 teams play a round to get into the playoffs. But for us, I mean, that's just like saying there's a 5th round in the playoffs. There's no, it's once you get in there, anything can happen. Everybody starts at 0, and you got to win games, and that means getting in is the only objective. And so for us, I think that is a possibility. It will be a challenge. There's no question. I think with the deficits that we have, you know, we're a small market team. You know, our budget is not the same as clubs that, you know, people from back home hear about. I mean, you hear about Zurich Lions, you hear about Davos, you hear about Bern. These are clubs, Zug, you know, these are clubs that, you know, Justin Abelkader played in Zug last year. I mean, this is a name that, you know, 4 or 5 years ago was a name that was synonymous with a Stanley Cup run for the Detroit Red Wings or for playoff plays. And so you start to see that, you know, you're at an uphill battle, but I mean, you still got to put your skates on, you still got to play the games. And our guys, you know, when they get a little bit of confidence, a little bit of structure to the game, and somebody that's kind of setting the tone, and that's I guess where I come in. I work pretty hard at my job. I'm pretty committed to whatever guys need to do to be successful. And if we can get guys kind of buying into that philosophy, I think it's a step in the right direction. We know it's a long-term adventure, let's say, where, you know, this isn't going to happen overnight, but we certainly have the ability and the potential to make some noise this year with, you know, just catching guys by surprise. I mean, like you mentioned, the team finished towards the bottom of the league last year. They were last in goals for, last in PP opportunities, last in PP goals. So all of a sudden, if we can increase just those things alone, we're giving ourselves a little bit of a better opportunity to be successful. And then, you know, our goaltending is very, very solid. Our D aren't dynamic at all. But then, you know, Montreal did the same thing last year in the playoffs. You know, they go with, albeit they have some very good experience in the back end, but nobody where you'd look at it and say, wow, that guy's going to be the next Cale Makar. You know, and not that Cale Makar is a bad player. It just simply means that they built their team a little bit differently and they had success that way. So that's what we're trying to preach to the guys, and that's what we expect out of them. And you know, if we're doing those things and we do a lot of things the right way, who knows what can happen.
So with the current roster the Tigers have right now, do you have any experience coaching other players there?
It's funny. I've actually coached against this club when they were down in the B League. There's a few of the players that I've coached on previous rosters, like when I was with Zug. We have a few players from there. So a guy like Janis Elsner, obviously, you know, Livio Langenecker. These are 2 young guys that I've coached in the past. Tim Gross-Nicholas, who's a defenseman, who actually played for us in Geneva when I was in the A as an assistant coach. So I do have some familiarity with some of these guys. And that's one of the things I try and do a lot of, is really spend time, whether it be just communicating or getting to know these guys, just to know who they are and what they're like, so that you can reach on them or can call on them at certain times and get a better feel for them. So I think it's one of the things, obviously, that we undervalue, because I mean, there's so many different ways that you can play the game. You know, you can forecheck, you know, a plethora of different ways. You can play different D zones. You can run different neutral zone forechecks. You run different power play breakouts and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the one common factor in all of those things is always going to be the players and how you deal with those players. I think how you manage those players becomes even more important than we actually think. So I believe that if I can do those things well with that group that we have and use some of those players that I have had contact before with and have worked with a little bit, I think they can build a lot of trust. And once we get that started, and I think that's where those players come into play. Like a guy like Grenier, who played with me last year and he's loaned the year before. He was really excited to come on board, really happy to come on board, and will be a large impact, not just on the ice, but certainly in the room and around the guys, where they know exactly what I'm like as a person, and he can kind of support that. So, yeah, I do have some familiarity and I do have some understanding of some of the guys, even the Swiss guys. Yeah. But until we get our hands in the fire, so to speak, and really have to put it down to the stone, we'll see how that works out.
So I know the roster looks pretty much, I was looking at the roster online. It looks pretty much like it's set for the most part. Yeah. We have to ask, I mean, for Maritime hockey and stuff, is there any chance that a Maritimer could be joining the team for the upcoming season?
You know what? There's it's funny that you guys mentioned that. I've talked to a few different guys from back home. You rely on some of the guys that obviously I keep very close tabs with a few guys who I run into or work with, or, like Taylor McDougall. I mean, T-Mac's been around for a while. Now he's working with Al Roy, who are, Maritime guys. Jim Midgley's still down in Halifax and scouting with Philly this year. Listen, I'm looking for this, or I'm looking. So again, it's kind of like coaching. It's got to be the right fit at the right time. But I always keep tabs on guys, and you're looking for the best. I think what you would say is the best person to fit, like whatever the best player is, or staff member, whatever that case may be, for your roster. And I've always believed that a lot of Maritimers possess a lot of really, really good qualities that may be the intangible, so to speak. So I always look for those guys back home who might be a good fit or maybe an asset to the team, because at the end of the day, it is still about producing and winning. But do I think that some guys back there could help us out? For sure. But again, it's also a matter of getting those guys to commit to coming here, and it's not easy. You've got guys like Lee, who could go to the KHL, or you've got a guy like Gagne, who signs in the DL as a defenseman, or Zach Sill, when he's playing in Cologne last year. I mean, you watch and you keep track of all of these guys, but at the end of the day, maybe they want to try something else, or they want to go in a different direction. So it's got a kind of a two street, but hopefully, we have a little bit of success this year, and then maybe guys are going, hey, wouldn't mind jumping over there for a while.
Yeah, and I know you kind of spoke about it, but for you as a head coach, how much impact do you have on the rosters, or more kind of like a GM decision?
I think in every team it's different.
Yeah.
I also believe that it's probably one of the most important relationships that you can have between staff members. I'm really fortunate in that our GM is someone that I've coached in the past, who understands, I think, probably what my character is like and the type of personality I have. So we talk quite a bit. Like, we talk more than, once a day or twice a day. I mean, we're constantly texting, talking, phoning. And that was one of the reasons why I stayed over the summer, not just moving and whatnot, but also that, Mark Eichman and I could work closely together. And we talk on a daily basis about players. We talk about, this year's roster, next year's roster. We're projecting 3 years down the road now. And I believe, I could be wrong. I'm sure it's done differently in different places. But you have to take everybody's advice or information and opinion, and then you have to make a decision. And our GM and I talk quite a bit about, what type of team he wants to have, because it is about the team that he wants. And so once we can find that right person, then it's up to me to kind of help. I mean, we just signed a player right now who he and I both worked extensively on for probably about a month and a half, almost 2 months. And he was a player that we had targeted, but it was a group decision. We talk to our assistant coaches. We talked to our GM, like my GM and myself. We talked to our scouts. We talked to even our ownership group and said, is this the type of guy that's going to be the right fit for us? Because at the end of the day, every player can have an impact, whether it's not just on the ice, but also things like in the dressing room, around the community.
these things are really important. And for a small organization like ours, it's even more important that they recognize how much of an impact they can have. So I think by taking everybody's advice and concerns or experience with each individual player into consideration, usually the more minds together, you can make a better decision, you know. And since we don't have an NHL staff where you're getting, 14 or 15 different scouts plus bird dogs plus assistant GMs and GMs and 3 coaches and blah 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 getting involved, we just have to use all of the guys that we have around here, and so we try and do that quite a bit.
I know over here back home it's summer, we're in full off season mode, but you guys are just starting up here. You said we're exhibition this week, so maybe you can just tell us about the exhibition games coming up.
Yeah, our preseason is a little bit longer, I think, than most players would like to have. It's over 6 weeks long.
Wow.
It's a lot of, and part of that is, I think, traditionally, the way teams work here is that they bring in guys because, number one, you want guys training together over the course of the summer. Yeah. Teams always believe that they're paying you during that time, so of course you need to be here at that time to work, which is understandable. But there was also, past experience, I think, once bitten, twice shy, the expression is, where, maybe guys didn't come into camp in very good shape. And so the teams have decided, okay, you know what, we're going to take that right out of your hands. We're going to remove that autonomy away from you, and we're going to dictate to what you're doing. So we've tried to get our, I've always believed that the longer we can allow those guys to be off, the more your success you're going to get with them in the long run. I think that's important. We've got 7 exhibition games. We've got one coming up on Wednesday. It's our first game. That's in 2 days. Then we have a game coming up on the weekend against Davos, which is like what they call a jubileums game, which means it's a celebratory game. It's supposed to be played last year in February, but of course with Corona and everything that was going on, you couldn't have fans. So now we've decided to do it in the preseason, where our fans can have kind of a tailgating party outside of our rink. We're allowed to have full capacity in our rink, so it's going to be an exciting one. And then we've got a couple of tournaments coming up, which are always good because you want some guys to spend a little bit of time together where they're kind of just focusing on hockey. And so, but we'll end up, our regular season starts, the first, so the 10th of September, excuse me, and we've got a lot of breaks. We've got the international breaks here in Europe, which a lot of teams don't get back home in the National League or the American League. And then we also have the Olympic break. So our league has to kind of scan, and then of course teams want to be done by the time the World Championships are getting around. So it ends up that teams have to kind of cram in their season a little bit differently than we do back home, and that makes it a little bit more challenging, I think. You don't play as many games, but you certainly do play them. And television deals aren't the same here that they are back home. So you get, the Friday night games, the Saturday games, and the Sunday games are really, really big for revenue. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is our league plays on a Tuesday night. That's a set night in the league. And then you have usually a Friday or Saturday or Sunday game. And that just plays towards the opportunity for fans to get out, buy beer, buy food, take their families and go to the rink and watch a game where, a lot of them, they're regionalized. Fans cheer for their team and they don't go anywhere else. And so, we tend to play a schedule that's a little bit more catering to the fans, so to speak. And our exhibition schedule, unfortunately, is also catering to the fans in the sense that, we started early, but that also gives them the opportunity while kids are still on holidays from school to get into the rink, watch some games, and see some things happen before everything kind of ramps up that way. So it's a little long, but it's, for the guys that are coming over from North America, it's tough because some of them leave their families. But at the same point in time, it gives you enough time to get acclimatized. That's the other way you can look at it. And you can always explain to guys that at least this way you get to, things like opening a bank account, getting your health insurance, getting our medical checks done, getting our media stuff, our media responsibilities all of these things can get done. And if you're coming from a different culture, man, it's not an easy sell for a guy to come in. You know, if you're going to the KHL and you got to speak Russian, maybe getting there a little bit early might help, because then you at least learn where the grocery store is and where, you know, if you got kids, where the hospital is and, you know, what school they might be going to. So that's one of the advantages, but certainly the time frame is definitely not an advantage, especially when you're missing the bulk of the summer for back home. You know, like I miss, you know, the most beautiful weather you get in the Maritime is usually in August. Well, I don't see any of that because I'm already on the ice practicing and playing games.
Yeah, and I don't know if Tanner, if you have any more questions, but before I ask, you have 2 boys, right? 2 sons.
Yes, I do.
Are they into hockey? Are they on a team or anything?
It's funny. It's funny. My oldest boy just quit. I guess it'd be 2 years ago. He's 14. He started reffing, and he plays American football. So he plays, you know, what we would call football in Zurich. So he plays that. His goal is to get a college scholarship through football. But he also is a referee, and he's the youngest referee to ever do the prospects program in Switzerland. So
Wow.
That's pretty cool. And then my youngest boy is 12. He's actually a really good player. He's into it quite heavily, wants to come back home and play, wants to go to, you know, play college most likely, wants to get back and play junior A in Canada so that he can have a chance to get a scholarship. So, you know, they're sporty guys anyway, but they're certainly, from being around the rink and stuff like that, they've gotten involved naturally or unnaturally, I guess, directly or indirectly from us. So that's the cool thing about it. Hopefully I can get them back home playing. And, you know, my little guy's trying out for what's called the Swiss Selects team, which is a team that travels to the Quebec Pee Wee International Tournament, which I never had the chance to play in when I was younger. So that would be really cool, because it would be the first time that any of his family members can actually see him play. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I don't know if you have any more questions, Thomas. Are you good?
No, I'm good. I could talk all day. So.
Listen, fellas, I really want to say thanks, because I know the amount of work that you guys do is it's, for me personally as a Maritimer, I find it fascinating. I'm really proud to be from the Maritimes. I always tell people that there's not, you know, I think when you come across, and you guys probably notice this just from our short interaction, but Maritimers often kind of seek out other Maritimers and talk to them. And I think what you guys are doing is really awesome. The exposure and just the ability to keep track of what's going on with all the people from back home is really, really impressive. So thank you guys very much for doing that. And you know, I'm a fan, so I really enjoy it. And I hope that you guys continue to do it. And I hope that you guys get the support you need to make sure that all this stuff continues to grow and flourish back home.
Perfect.
Well,
Thank
thanks,
you so
Jason.
much.
Thanks for joining us today. And we're looking forward to certain seasons starting soon. So we hope we can start watching some games.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys.